You must have been excited about starting up a Rem business here in Perth. Was it more challenging than you anticipated?
When I kicked off was 2008 and we had that crash and I couldn't find business.
Be careful what you say to yourself because you're always listening. So
I've always looked at leadership or a part of leadership from a consulting perspective as having that level of expertise, because that level of expertise represents how one would look to.
how do you go about building trust? What's the process? What does trust mean?
You need to have good relationships with everyone. And I said, but I can't.
What differentiates a good remuneration framework from a bad one?
When I wake up in a lousy mood, I generally speak to my project manager to cancel my meetings, and I don't want any calls. Because
And what advice would you give your 25-year-old self to help you build a better quality life? Allan Feinberg, welcome to Hearts and Minds.
Thank you.
It's good to see you. You've, for more than 20 years now, you've been advising boards and REM committees and HR executives in remuneration and reward strategy. And you do a lot of work in the mining industry. So I think our listeners would be particularly interested to understand how your expertise helps business leaders to engage with their people and by extension develop and shape their behaviour and develop the culture of the workplace. So we'll delve into that area very shortly, Allan, but let's get to know you a little bit better. Tell us about your early formative years.
There wasn't a grand plan to get into REM. So the simple fact of the matter is I was lazing around. My wife came home. She said she was pregnant. And the next day I started looking for a job. And the only company that would employ me on 24 hours notice was a salary survey company.
This is where, in South Africa?
This is in South Africa.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's how my my career started.
That's how
in
your
REM.
career started. Pre-career, tell us a little bit about your family background. Did you have siblings? Where did you grow up?
Grew up in Johannesburg.
Yeah.
Siblings, one brother from first marriage, 2 kids from my father's second marriage, another 2 kids from his third marriage.
Really? A lot of marriages.
Yes, and in fact, when I got married, he said to me, I need to give you some advice. And I said, what's that advice? He said, well, your first wife is probably your best wife.
Dear. Well, I hope you took keen advice from him.
I did take good advice from him. And in fact, today's my 30th wedding anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. So when did you arrive in Australia?
In 2006.
Okay, not that long ago, really. And so back in before you came here, you obviously had established a career in salary survey in South Africa.
Yeah, so before I came, I was with Hay Group, not Hayes, but Hay Group.
Yes, often confused, aren't they?
Often confused.
I know.
And I was actually at a conference in France.
Yeah.
And I was sitting next to somebody from Hay Group Australia. And she said to me, we've been looking to get someone into Perth to open up an office. And I said, well, I haven't seen any advertisements going through. She said, well, no one's applied. So if you applied, you'll probably get the job.
Wow.
And 5 months later, I was in Oz.
And had you visited Perth before that?
We came once, and I remember my wife and I got off the plane, and we said we love it.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah.
So we just knew that we wanted to come.
There is a big South African community here in Perth, isn't there? And many of them, of course, in the mining industry.
Yeah, there's about 200,000.
Wow.
And if you go further north, it becomes a lot more evident.
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, South Africa and Western Australia have a lot in common. Not dissimilar climate. Obviously, the mining industry is pretty key to the economy. Perhaps, the values and characters of the people are quite similar.
Values is an interesting one. Culture is an interesting one. Because I recall I was here for about 8 or 9 months. And I spoke to a mate in South Africa, and he said to me, what are the people like? And I said, exactly the same as South Africa. Absolutely no difference, until someone called me an invader. And I then looked up a few things, and I realized that there's a bit of a difference in culture. So Generally, South Africans are known to be somewhat pointed.
Yeah, direct, yeah.
Yeah.
Who do you support in the rugby and the cricket? That's the important thing.
I can't stand cricket, can't stand it. But rugby is the Wallabies, depressingly, because when I got here, I wanted to make sure that my kids became Aussies.
Yeah.
So you can't support a South African team and ensure that they're Australian. So
Well, good on you.
I support the Wallabies.
I thought you'd be a Springboks fan, so good on you for doing that. How many kids have you got?
3.
What age range are they?
26 or
Yep.
27.
Yep.
27, I lose count.
Yep.
26 and 16-year-old
Okay,
daughter.
so you had one that was born in Australia?
2 in Joburg.
Yep.
But when we came across, they were 5 and 7.
Yeah.
And then my daughter, I call her my little Aussie. So
Yeah.
she was born in Australia,
Yeah.
2013.
Do the younger ones have a South African twang to their accent, or are they Aussies?
You know, the eldest one sounds like he just got off the boat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
The middle one is bit of Aussie.
Yeah.
And my little one is, people ask if she's South African. And she gets irritated. She
Yeah.
says, I'm Australian, I'm not South African.
It's often the way it goes. I'm the youngest of 3 kids, and the age span between youngest and oldest is 8 years. And when we emigrated to Perth in 1971 from the UK, I was 9. But my older siblings have more of a Yorkshire accent. But most people find it hard to believe that I'm English.
It up.
Yeah. Tell us something about yourself that not many people know, perhaps outside of your immediate family.
What I always wanted to do, and I never got the chance, and that was buy a ticket, go to Israel with my wife, go live in a kibbutz, and I wanted to drive a red tractor and watch the sunset.
Drive a red tractor?
It's this thing about a red tractor.
Yeah.
Not a yellow, not a green, a red tractor. So that's what I wanted to do.
How often have you visited Israel?
Only once as a kid.
Going through a lot of pain and trauma at the moment, that whole region. When you're not concentrating on your work, what do you do, Allan, to relax?
Well, when my wife is not watching, donuts and milk. But but generally to relax, I like watching movies. It takes my mind off everything else, and watching my kids.
Yeah,
get a kick out of that.
Owning your own small business, requires you to be really on mission all the time, doesn't it? It's hard to spend extended periods of time away when you've got a small business to manage and direct.
It is hard to do that. Fortunately, though, I've got 2 business partners, and when I do go away, I went to South Africa for a week last week. They generally, well, not generally, they do. They hold the fort down. So I'm pretty fortunate in that respect.
Do you go to the Indaba conference, or have you?
I haven't. And as terrible as this may sound, I have this anxiety that if I go to South Africa too many times, and excuse me, South African clients, I'll be mugged or shot. So
it's that bad, is it? Especially in Joburg?
Well, Joburg's bad.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been attacked a few times, as was my wife.
Yeah.
So natural anxiety.
Let's talk a bit more about your professional background. You've already said that you started off your career as in a salary survey firm, and you got the opportunity with Hay to move into executive remuneration. What do you enjoy about this area of expertise?
The people. I enjoy the people. So if you look at the sector or the industry, which happens to be mining, it's not really mining that I enjoy. It's this environment. So what you have is business people, you have entrepreneurs, you have dreamers, and you have people that, have fallen off the horse so many times, yet they still get back on that horse and they chase that pot of gold. So being able to develop, incentive-based plans around that, where people can actually get rewarded, for their endeavours. I genuinely like that.
I can understand the sentiment there, and certainly, I'm in a small consultancy as well, and it's all about the characters and the individuals that you're dealing with and the relationships that you develop. And mining is such a unique industry, isn't it? Especially in the small exploration and project development part of the industry, where very often businesses are running off the smell of an oily rag, and there's high risk, but a lot of hope and expectation, and that tends to attract certain types of people into the industry. So you spent some time at Hay, an established and quite renowned consulting firm. Why did you decide to set up your own business in this area?
Well, I saw an opportunity in the marketplace, and I actually went back to my principals with that opportunity, and they decided not to go ahead with it. So I decided to move forward with it. And that consultancy was called Osrem. Also had a remuneration database, board and executive consulting, even though a lot of the consulting back then was broad-based consulting. And that was sold to Mercer later on.
Was this your first step into owning and operating your own business?
No. In fact, back in South Africa, I had 2 other businesses that I sold. They weren't large businesses, but certainly enough value that someone wanted to buy them. But they were, trading businesses. So clothing, which, in Yiddish is schmatter, schmatter trade, and toys, stationery, household goods. And I used to bring in containers from China and distribute them. So very different to remuneration consulting.
You must have been excited about starting up a REM business here in Perth. Was it more challenging than you anticipated, or did you find it relatively easy to, build those client relationships?
Well, it's never easy. And, it's always a good idea at the time until you actually started, and then you wish you didn't. But in order to get going, I had some good relationships. And I recall that when I kicked off was 2008, and we had that crash. And I couldn't find business. And a colleague of mine at BHP used to phone me up and say, "How are things going?" I'd say, "Fantastic." Phone me up again the second month, "How things are going?" "Fantastic." Third month he phoned me up. I just had enough money to pay the rent, and I couldn't even put petrol in the car. And I said to him, "Not so good." And he said, "Come have a cup of coffee." And he gave me a lifeline. And it's been like that ever since, that fair go. Part of the reason, I love Australia is that I was given an opportunity, and, that's allowed me to build a business, and very fortunate.
Why is the mining industry so distinctive when it comes to REM and reward strategies as opposed to other industries? How is it so different?
It's lack of understanding. So if you look at other industries where you have, post-revenue businesses, it's pretty much established. You have a short-term incentive scheme, which represents a very defined period, very defined metrics. You have long-term incentive schemes, again, very defined and determined. Whereas within mining, I look upon it like a private equity environment. Essentially you've got your explorers, you've got your developers, you've got your producers, and all of them actually require different types of incentive mechanisms. Now, many people don't realize that. Many REM consultants who aren't in the sector don't realize that. And they look to provide cut and paste producer models onto these developer and explorer models. And that's where it goes wrong. So one needs to understand, the mining curve. One needs to understand inflection values. And one also needs to understand, cycles within mining in order to ensure that you have incentive plans that essentially, smooth out. And that's not what the sector is very good at. Sector is very much short-term from a remuneration perspective.
Yeah. You raise some very good points as you've explained that. It's I can see how different the mining sector would be to pretty much all other industries. As you say, there are pre-revenue generating businesses that are desperately trying to convert into production, and then you've got the cash flow positive companies that, and not only are the businesses different, but the style of leadership that would be appropriate at different stages of the project life cycle is an important factor as well. It's some companies prefer leaders that are steady as she goes, managers of established businesses versus the more entrepreneurial, pre-revenue people that are, doing the investor roadshows every other week and so on.
Well, it takes different characters, different personalities to manage the business through those cycles. So you also need, a higher risk profile for early stage. And if you're looking for high risk profile, you're looking at a very different animal that you'll find in a producer environment. So the other issue around the people is also the REM. If you're looking to involve a person in an explore develop environment, that individual is looking for equity. That individual is very akin to a founder. Whereas when you advance towards that producer environment, it's less of a risk profile. I'm not saying it's not risky, but it's less of a risk profile. And the remuneration also changes in order to take that into account. So in looking to get the right individual, it's about personality, it's understanding who you're dealing with and what the company needs. And if you're looking to take an individual who's been, in a producer environment, a large, stable producer environment, and then put them into, an explorer developer, I'm not saying it doesn't work, but it's a lot more difficult because that incumbent is more used to, processes, systems that are in place. And, when you're in explorer development, you don't really know what's going to happen next year or whether or not you'll have money in the pot. Again, it takes a very, very different type of individual in order to manage that.
Before we dig a little bit deeper into the components of the REM structures, you're building relationships with a lot of leaders within various mining businesses. In your opinion and experience, what are the non-negotiable qualities of leadership? What makes somebody particularly effective from a personal quality point of view?
From a personal quality? Well, from a leadership perspective, as a consultant, well, I recall going back many years, back in South Africa, and my boss back then booked me out to a client for the day. And he called me after the event to say, this is where you're going for the day, and I've charged you out for 2,500 rand. And I looked at him and I said, are you mad? Who's going to pay me 2,500 rand? And he said to me, well, generally speaking, if you know more, just a little bit more than anybody else in the room, you should be able to lead the conversation. So I've always looked at leadership or a part of leadership from a consulting perspective as having, that level of expertise, because that level of expertise represents, how one would look to lead or involve oneself in that conversation.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think many clients judge consultants, whatever the expertise area is, they judge them on the quality of the questions that the consultant asks.
Yeah.
Because even though you do have an area of expertise, you're not expected to know everything about the client's business. But you do need to be curious, and you need to be well prepared and clever in terms of interrogating the client by asking them questions that get to the nut of the problem you're engaged to solve.
And that takes research. So every client I go to and every piece of work I do, yes, there's always 7 to 80% that may be standard, but it's the 20% that one needs to research. And I spend a fair amount of times on that research because you need to get it right, because you're dealing with people's income, regardless of what their current wealth is. And you're only as good as your last assignment.
That's right. The aim, of course, is to build trust with the client. How do you go about building trust? What's the process, and what does trust mean?
Well, from a trust perspective, I would say that 90% of our business is referrals or reoccurring business. So trust is as a result of the credibility that we've gained over the years. And that represents, 20 years of being within the sector. So credibility is equal to the trust. And then once you're in the room, essentially the way that we work is that we look to put enough information and insight onto the table in order for those individuals to make good decisions. And I've lost a number of clients over the years, but I certainly have a view. I don't expect clients to take that view, but I certainly do take issue when I see work that has been produced under my name and a lot of conditions have been taken away. And in that instance, I will essentially pull back and withdraw my work. So clients know that I'll do my best, but there's got to be, goodwill and trust between the parties.
I agree. Credibility is a very important factor in building trust. So is reliability. In other words, following through with commitments that you make.
Yeah.
And developing a level of intimacy as well, or familiarity with the client. And that can only come over time. And consultancy is a lot about getting to know the client's the entirety of their situation, not just what they do when they turn up at the office.
Yeah.
So it's showing an interest in their leisure activities, their family activities, and taking a genuine interest in their well-being. If you can genuinely establish that type of relationship, it goes a long way to building trust, I think.
Well, I remember somebody once saying to me, you need to have good relationships with everyone. And I said, but I can't, because if I'm going to deal with somebody, I first need to like them. And if I like them, I can work with them. But if I don't like them, then quite simply, I'm not going to be able to work with them. So generally the people that I work with, I like. And I've known them for years and years. And that's part of, loving to be a consultant, is dealing and working with people that you genuinely like, and learning about their businesses. And I like learning about other people's businesses.
What differentiates a good remuneration framework from a bad one?
I don't think per se there's good frameworks or bad frameworks. So what you want is a framework that ensures that both parties make money. And when I say both parties, I'm talking the company/shareholders and the incumbent. And if you've got that relationship or that structure where both parties make money, now whether it could be optimum, the fact of the matter is that represents a good framework. So the framework really is, fit for purpose for that particular business. But one framework can work in one business and may not work in another business. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad framework.
That's right. It's, as you say, it needs to be customised to the where the business sits in the life cycle of the project. Can incentives really shape behaviour? How do they do that?
Somebody told me a long time ago that if you want a person to jump, you hit them at the back pocket, or you can pad their back pocket. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that promotes good or bad behaviour, but I can tell you now it certainly changes behaviour.
It's certainly a big factor, isn't it? Not only in terms of attracting people to new employers, but the retention of those people. It's certainly a significant factor.
It depends on the market that you're working in. So we're working in a market where there's a scarcity of skill. So it's implicit that you will remunerate me and you'll remunerate me well. And that doesn't really become an issue. In that environment, it's more about the business and the future, because you'll pay me the money that I need. If the situation was reversed and it was an employer's market, well, that becomes a lot different situation. So in terms of REM, does it retain? I think it incentivizes. I think it needs to be fair, because remuneration by its very nature represents an arrangement between two parties. That arrangement between both parties, regardless of the contract, there needs to be an element of goodwill. There needs to be an element of trust. You take away the trust, or if there's any type of reneging of that agreement, then the relationship falls to pieces. So the remuneration is not just about money. It's more than money. It's about that relationship. In terms of how you structure the package, well, you got retention, you got incentive, and you got capability. And all three are very, very different elements. So one of the fallacies that many boards have is that if we pay well, we are going to retain you. And no, because we are paying you, we are giving you an incentive, but an incentive is a carrot on a stick. So we can give you a zillion options. Fantastic. The company down the road can also give me a zillion options. So it's not really that retentive. The question is, how do you retain? How do you lock in? And that becomes a different conversation.
Most people are familiar with a remuneration package consisting of four main elements, a base salary and the statutory superannuation that is paid here in Australia, and then short-term incentives and long-term incentives. Talk in a little bit more detail about the STI and the LTI that you're seeing a lot in the industry, and what proportionality do they have relative to a base salary?
First of all, in terms of elements. So, yes, you have your, I'll call it total fixed rem, which includes your benefits and allowances. You have your STI and your LTI. But again, that's in a producing environment. Many companies try and take that template and put it into a explorer environment. So generally in an explorer development environment, it's a lot more variable in terms of meeting, I wouldn't say objectives, but milestones. So it's very much inward focused. So you generally look at, certainly in terms of what we suggest, project incentive plans and long-term incentive plans within a period. STRs we've discussed, LTRs we've discussed. What also works is, retention payments, where that represents pure retention, where individuals get a sum for a defined period and they need to be there for that defined period.
How does that differ, Allan, from what I understand an LTI program to do? You know, I'm used to hearing people say, look, after a vesting period of 3 years, you get paid X share options or performance rights. How is the retention payment different from that?
Well, if you look at a long-term incentive, there'll be a view that a long-term incentive is retentive, but it's not. A long-term incentive is just that. It's an incentive. It's performance-based. It may have a retentive ability, but it's not a retention plan. A retention and capability plan is based purely on tenure. So there is no performance element.
Right.
So in essence, what you're doing is you're mitigating risk. So if the incentive falls over for whatever reason, you're still retaining the person from a retention perspective. So that's the risk mitigation, which is in your risk and governance charter. And it's just like, when you invest your money in super, you don't put it into one or two companies, you spread it. Remuneration is exactly the same thing. You need to spread it amongst different parcels in order to lock in.
How commonplace in the mining industry is this retention payment? I don't come across it that often as an executive recruiter. Obviously, the STI and LTI are commonplace amongst the producers, but I don't often hear about a retention payment.
Well, the thing about the retention payment is that one needs to be cautious where one uses it. So you don't really want to use it for key management personnel, because that provides, a jaundiced view that the company's got to lock in their KMPs in through retention payments. But where it does work is where a company has had a share price crash. All the incumbents, are now in dire straits.
Yeah.
They already were on, minimal salaries. So the question is, how do you lock those people in? So one way to lock them in is through retention payments. And there have been companies that have done that in the past before. And that's the retention payment. So it can't be used everywhere. Again, there is no boilerplate. Well, they've used it, therefore we have to use it. It needs to make commercial sense. And the thing with shareholders is that they will listen if it makes commercial sense. One of the large problems that boards have in terms of designing these plans is that they look to make it very governance focused, as opposed to understanding what the company needs, developing that plan, and thereafterwards then developing the protocols in order to ensure that all company or shareholder and management interests are protected.
Can a poorly designed incentive structure damage the culture of a business? And if so, how?
So essentially, if you look at REM, you look at incentives. At its root is an agreement between the two parties. And it's also a question of values. So what are values? Values is honesty, it's integrity. So when you have an incentive plan, you know that the board has got absolute discretion. They can pull it back. Now, if that incentive plan is pulled back for whatever reason, whether it's legitimate or not legitimate, or the board has shown discretion, what that does is it results in a breakdown of trust and goodwill. And you can't build a culture on the back of broken promises.
From a remuneration perspective, Allan, what's the biggest challenge in mining today?
I would reckon that a lack of understanding in terms of what needs to be developed, because many incumbents don't understand the actual industry. And when I say the industry, the cyclical movements of the industry.
You mean the consultants don't understand the mining industry? Or
Not even the consultants.
Okay.
But at times, you're dealing with people that sit on boards that are very competent, but they've drawn short straw and they've landed on REM committee because no one chooses to do remuneration. No one chooses to be a REM consultant. It's just something that happens. So yes, you do find consultants that don't know the business come into the sector and look to implement, manufacturing incentive models on top of a mining business. The other issue around the sector is that this reliance on market data. Now, yes, we run our salary survey, we have market data, but the market data is just one aspect of it. It doesn't mean that it's the rule or the law. It's a guideline. When you look at financial statements, there's a perception that, well, that's the way they did it, therefore we need to do it. But most of the market is not good practice, it's bad practice. So it's understanding what's out there, but then looking to understand what we're going to do in order to make sure that it works for our business.
So what piece of advice would you give a Ned who, for the first time, has landed the chair of the REM committee job in a small mining company? What's the first piece of advice you'd give that person?
Well, I've dealt with many people that have come into that role, and I haven't found one person that has given me a directive. It's always been, a discussion. And everybody's got a view on remuneration, which is good. But it's always been an engaging process. And that always makes it easier in order to work with anyone. But no, I've never had anyone that said to me, this is exactly what I want to do. And if you don't like it, well, there's the door. No.
What's a question you might have for me, Allan, without notice?
Well, what would be interesting is that, you deal with a fair amount of boards. You also deal with a fair amount of candidates. And they will certainly have a view in terms of what they want. And the company will certainly have a structural process in terms of what they're looking to offer. So what I'd like to understand is, what are these candidates looking for? What is the company actually offering? And what does that divide look like in terms of, whether it's cash, whether it's a value proposition? That would be good to understand.
That's a good question. And the value proposition that employers believe they're offering is not always the value that is perceived by the candidates. There is sometimes a misalignment there. Generally speaking, when I get a brief from a chairman of a board to recruit a NED or a CEO to recruit, let's say, a chief technical officer, obviously they are concerned that I understand the technical and functional competencies that this individual would need to have. That's a relatively easy part of searching for a good candidate, is ticking those qualification, education, experience boxes. What we need to talk about with the client in depth is the leadership capabilities and style and values of a candidate to ensure that there is a good alignment between the values-based culture of the business, whatever it might be, at that stage of its corporate development, and the candidate. And that's where I think good judgment from any good executive search consultant is the value that they're providing the client. So I generally say to people, look, we're looking to identify two things: capability and character. Capability is relatively easy to measure and validate. Character is a little bit more intuitive. You have to get to, in a fairly limited period of time, you have to get to know the candidate, what aspirations they have, where their motivational triggers lie, where their values lie, and then make a judgment as to how good the alignment might be with a particular workplace. So I don't think that over time, and I've been in the industry like you've been in yours for quite a long time, I don't think that's changed massively over time in terms of what employers are looking for. From a candidate perspective, yes, a certain level of financial reward is always important. They look at the reputational value of the company. They look at the quality of leadership at both the board and the executive levels. That's an influencing factor in their level of interest in an opportunity. And they look at the challenge of the particular position as well. So, yeah, those are the sorts of things that candidates look for. Rem is rarely, in my experience, the number one or number two factor. It's usually, number 4 or number 5. Once the candidate has convinced themselves that of the quality of the assets of the company, or the quality of the projects, the quality of the leadership, and they understand the culture of the place, then once they've ticked those boxes, then they start looking more seriously at the financial reward that's on offer.
So they aren't asking for anything which is different. I've come across some clients that will insist, I want 2% or 3% of the business up front, and they're not founders. So those type of out of the box requirements.
Well, we obviously need to look at the track record of the individual. Past behaviour is usually the best predictor of future behaviour. So we need people with a certain level of energy and obviously the technical competency to understand what their team of people will be doing. But at the end of the day, especially at the executive level, of course, it's all about the quality of the leadership that a person can demonstrate.
Bring to the business,
We're expecting these candidates to model the values and behaviours that need to be replicated by other people. They have to be good role models. And very often people who get to the C-suite level on the executive team are technocrats. They come from a very technical grounding as engineers or geologists or metallurgists. Their skills are less well developed in terms of the people leadership side of things. And that's where often the challenge lies, because at the C-suite, it's less about technical expertise. It's more about people and business leadership skills. So you've got to be across all of those things, I think.
Thanks.
Now, some rapid-fire questions, Allan. When you look in the rear vision mirror of your career to date, what are you most proud of?
Well, the fact that I came to Oz in 2006 and started off a business and managed to support my family. So that's what I'm proud of.
And looking toward the future, what would you most like to accomplish during the balance of your career?
I'm not quite finished yet. Still looking to build the business, which we're looking to do. We're going into certain tax compliance products, which we'll be launching. So, still energized.
A lot to do.
Yes.
How do you keep yourself informed? Are you a person that reads newspapers, listen to podcasts?
I like podcasts, a lot of research and reading. And then my best avenue is clients. Because I learn one hell of a lot with clients, especially those clients that want to do, out-of-the-box things. I'll then go back and research it, or speaking with clients that have done out-of-the-box things. So that's the beauty of being a consultant, is that, and that's what people pay for, is to get that understanding of what everybody else is doing. So that's where a lot of knowledge comes from.
You never stop learning, do you?
No.
And it's important for all consultants to remain curious, to
Yes.
want to learn, to want to improve their ability to service and provide value.
Definitely.
Are you willing to share one of your vulnerabilities?
I can come across as prickly, even though I don't mean to be.
No.
No.
That
So-
surprises me. And when you think about people, either living or deceased, Allan, great leaders in your assessment, who do you think of? And if you had an opportunity to sit down with them over dinner, what would be a question you'd like them to answer?
I like Thomas Edison because he once said that he doesn't make mistakes. He just finds and has found 10,000 ways not to do things. And that included, talking knolls, electric pens.
Yeah.
And it's that ability to come back in that state of mind that I deeply respect.
That's an interesting choice. So have you read a biography of
Yes,
of him?
yes.
Yeah, he's often I haven't, but he's often described as the greatest inventor that ever lived, one of the greatest minds that have ever lived. People, I think I have read biographies of Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, and both of those individuals find inspiration in Thomas Edison and having read things that he did.
Yeah.
And you can't learn without making mistakes and failures, can you?
And people never realize the mistakes because all they see is the success. But for every success, there's 100 misfortunes.
Yeah, that's right. What's a non-fiction book that you found very valuable to help you develop your leadership skills?
Well, it's a book that I read when I was at uni, and it was by Eliyahu Goldratt. And he was known as the prophet, and he was a manufacturing guru. And he came up with the theory of constraints. And essentially he said that every constraint that you solve results in another constraint, and that's life.
What period of time did he live in?
Oh, he passed away, I think, 2011.
Okay, recent.
Yeah.
What energizes you?
How do I get energized? Maybe better. So every time I get despondent or depressed, I tell myself that I need to look at life through the eyes of a 26-year-old, because as a 26-year-old, there's opportunity and there's hope. So that's how I get energized.
I often think about self-talk. A lot of people talk to themselves. It's natural. I do a heck of a lot. When you find yourself talking to yourself, are you beating yourself up most of the time, or are you encouraging yourself?
I do beat myself up because I always want to do better. And yes, my wife thinks I'm mad, but I do talk to myself, especially when I'm thinking. It's far better to hear yourself than to mull the ideas around in your mind. So a bit of both.
Me too. Someone said, be careful what you say to yourself because you're always listening. So,
that's good.
You do need to be very mindful of your mindset and how you influence your mindset through self-talk.
Yeah.
Do you have a daily habit or a routine that you think is valuable to yourself? It's a good productivity hack. It makes you feel better. It makes you work better.
Yes. So when I wake up, if I'm in a fantastic mood, then that's the day that I need to go and speak to clients, make phone calls, because I feel inspired and my mind is clicking over. But when I wake up in a lousy mood, I generally speak to my project manager to cancel my meetings, and I don't want any calls because it wouldn't be wise for me to speak to anyone.
You do have to be in the zone,
yes,
don't you?
Definitely.
You have to be in the right mindset. I find the same thing. When you're making business development calls on the telephone, I'm very conscious that you need to present yourself as a bright-eyed, smiling, positive, value-adding person. And if you don't believe you can sincerely come across that way, don't pick up the phone.
Don't pick up the phone.
Do something more mechanical, more monotonous, more routine.
That's it.
That takes you away from what really matters, and that's the other person.
We're alike.
We are. And we both support the Wallabies as well. Final question, what advice would you give your 25-year-old self to help you build a better quality life?
Firstly, the first part would have been to see more of the world. And again, I go back to that kibbutz and that red tractor.
What is it with the red tractor as opposed to a black tractor?
I don't know. I think maybe it was a picture I may have seen.
Right.
That my grandmother was reading to me.
Okay.
She used to read me books.
Okay.
And I swear it comes from one of the books she gave me.
Yeah.
And there was a red tractor in it. So I'm just fixated with this red tractor. So will I ever do it? Probably land up pushing me around in a wheelchair. And I'll have my wife running after me with my disposable nappies.
Well,
so that's what I can look forward to.
We've been talking about REM structures. You need to incentivize your partners and your staff to make you lots of money so you can retire and go and do these things.
From your mouth to God's ears.
Look, it's been a joy talking with you, Allan. Thanks for spending the time with me.
Thank you, David.
We've learned a bit about you personally. Hopefully our listeners find that of interest, but also we've heard your point of view and philosophy, if you like, in how best to incentivize and reward people to engage with them better and to ultimately build a better culture in the workplace. So thanks for being part of our program.
Thank you.
Thanks also to Podwave Studios and to Carol Wilson and Alana Bray-White for helping put this episode together. See you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to Hearts and Minds. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave us a rating or share it with a friend. And don't forget to follow us and connect on social media for updates on all of our upcoming guests. I'm Alana Bray-White, and I look forward to you joining us for our next episode.